Black Bird of Chernobyl. According to legend, several people began to see a large, winged creature with red eyes in early April before the Chernobyl disaster. The creature became known as the Black Bird of Chernobyl, and many have drawn parallels between this creature and America's Mothman. Both creatures were supposedly seen right before disasters. The Mothman was spotted right before the Silver Bridge collapsed in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, a tragedy that cost 46 people their lives. They're also similar in appearance, large, black, winged figures with glowing scarlet eyes. Survivors of the Chernobyl disaster reported seeing the creature flying away from the reactor. Reports of the bird stopped immediately after the disaster. Those who believe that the bird was a paranormal entity regard it as a harbinger of terrible things to come, while others believe it was merely a black stork. Beginning in early April 1986, the people in and around the little-known Chernobyl nuclear power plant began to experience a series of strange events revolving around sightings of a mysterious creature described as a large, dark, and headless man with gigantic wings and piercing red eyes. People affected by this phenomena experienced horrific nightmares, threatening phone calls and first-hand encounters with the winged beast, which became known as the Black Bird of Chernobyl. Something strange is here. Reports of these strange happenings continued to increase until the morning of April 26, 1986, when at 1:23 a.m., Reactor 4 of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant experienced a catastrophic steam explosion that resulted in a fire which caused a series of additional explosions followed by a nuclear meltdown. The power plant, located near Pripyat, Ukraine, Soviet Union, spewed a plume of radioactive fallout which drifted over parts of the Western Soviet Union, Eastern and Western Europe, Scandinavia, the UK, Ireland and Eastern North America. Large areas of Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia were badly contaminated, resulting in the evacuation and resettlement of over 336,000 people. The Chernobyl disaster, as the incident was dubbed, is considered the worst accident ever in the history of nuclear power. In the days before the tragic occurrence, several Chernobyl employees had reported seeing a large, dark/black shape like a headless man with gigantic wings and red, fire-like eyes. As with the appearances of Mothman, people who had seen the phenomena had been having nightmares and some received strange phone calls. Some of the employees reported the strange things to their supervisors at the plant. Meltdown. Following the meltdown, and subsequent explosions and fires, Soviet helicopters were dispatched to the scene, equipped with special firefighting gear. These helicopters circled the plant, dropping clay, sand, lead and other extinguishing chemicals onto the burning facility. Most of the fire was put out by 5 a.m. with the fire burning within Reactor 4 continuing to blaze for several hours after. The firefighters who responded were unaware of the nature of the fire, assuming that it was simply an electrical fire, and received massive overdoses of radiation leading to many of their deaths, including Lieutenant Vladimir Pervik, who died on May 9, 1986. The workers who survived the initial blast and fire, but would later die of radiation poisoning, claimed to have witnessed what has been described as a large black, bird-like creature, with a 20-foot wingspan, gliding through the swirling plumes of irradiated smoke pouring from the reactor. No further sightings of the Black Bird of Chernobyl were reported after the Chernobyl disaster, leaving researchers to speculate just what haunted the workers of the plant during the days leading up to the disaster. The most commonly accepted theory suggests that the Black Bird of Chernobyl may have been the same creature spotted in Point Pleasant, West Virginia leading up to the collapse of the Silver Bridge on December 15, 1968. Investigators have suggested that the appearance of this creature is an omen of disasters to come in the area in which it shows itself. The physical description of both the Black Bird of Chernobyl and the Mothman, the creature sighted in West Virginia, are very similar, and the reports of nightmares and threatening phone calls leading up to these disasters are shared in both cases. A second, less accepted theory, suggests that the Black Bird of Chernobyl was nothing more than the misidentification of the black stork, an endangered species endemic to southern Eurasia. The black stork stands nearly 3 feet tall and has a wingspan of nearly 6 feet. This theory, however, fails to take into account the menacing phone calls and the disturbing nightmares. Also, the physical description given by the majority of eyewitnesses who actually saw the Black Bird of Chernobyl does not in any way match the physical appearance of the black stork. Both the Black Bird of Chernobyl and the Mothman have not been sighted since their respective disasters, leaving us with many unanswered questions. All we can do is wait for the beast to show itself again and give us a chance to figure out just what it may be. Unfortunately, it would appear that for this creature to show up again, we will have to anticipate some form of disaster in the area it has selected to appear. There is more stories when it comes to Chernobyl. Here are a few I wanted to share with you. Kapaka Kindergarten. Kapaka was a small village about 4.5 miles southwest of the Chernobyl plant. After evacuating the village, Soviet authorities found such high radiation levels in the area they decided to bulldoze everything in Kapaka other than the elementary school and bury it all in the soil. Unbeknownst to those who made this decision, burying radioactive materials results in their radioactivity leaking into the ground. In the case of Kapaka, the radioactivity of buildings became part of the soil and water table, making the region uninhabitable for generations. The surviving school is an attraction for ruin photographers, who have captured eerie Kapaka images of old toys, school materials, dolls, and stuffed animals 3 decades on from the meltdown. The ghosts of Chernobyl. As with any site where a number of people have lost their lives, Pripyat is rife with ghost stories. Andrei Korsakov, a nuclear physicist from New York, told one such story after visiting the area in 1997. Korsakov said he went to the power station at 7:30 a.m. and went to the number 4 reactor sarcophagus, which is where the explosion occurred. He could not go inside due to radiation, but as he took radiation readings, he heard someone screaming for rescue from a fire inside. I ran upstairs to tell someone, but they said that when I entered the reactor control room, I was the first person to open that door in 3 years, and the only way to get inside the old reactor is through the doors I came in through. If someone had gone inside the reactor when I was not looking, they would have tripped an alarm that goes off when the reactor door is opened mechanically. The reactor door requires a password and a handprint, yet someone, or something, was inside. Later that evening, as we were eating dinner outside the building by the river next to the plant, a floodlight turned on in the room of the installation. There was no way anyone could be inside. As we ate, we figured there was a power surge or something. Then just as my colleague said that, the light turned off. Performers were brought in to calm local residents, and contracted radiation sickness themselves. Hi everyone. I'm Jake and I met Yuri in a bar in Finland. This is my Reddit account. Over a couple nights, and some vodka, I recorded his voice to capture the story and piece it together. These are his words, his story. If you were to meet Yuri, as I have, you might not be so doubtful. The man is a gifted musician, a gentle soul, and it was a true gift to meet him. I've shared some of the positive comments with him, but I'm not reading anything negative. Peace. According to Redditor/u/creepyjake, Yuri's account is as follows. Please forgive my poor English because it cannot be my primary choice language. Please call me Yuri. I'm a musician in taverns of Northern Europe for drinks and for the generosity of patrons. I was once classically trained pianist. I studied at the St. Petersburg Conservatory in the late 1970s. I lost my eyesight, and I have numerous illness. I am a survivor of Chernobyl. As the disaster commencement occurred, I was in state-sponsored musical/dance troupe. Our gathering was immediately enlisted by the government to calm village peoples in Pripyat and surrounding area. Mere hours after the meltdown commenced, our bus entered the exclusion zone at checkpoint Daihiki. We were told not anything, and the soldiers made it forbidden for speaking with the village people. Imagine not knowing a disaster taking place, yet seeing the strange workings of the radioactivity all around. Everyone was sick and dying, yet quarantined and not allowed to leave the zone. Some believed the world was ending, and we all became resigned to the fact we will certainly die. The soldiers have masks and guns, but I could see the fear on his face too. As dead men and women, we gave our best musician and dancer performances ever. Allow me to describe our final performance at Pripyat. As the music played, the ballerina danced like never before. The passion in the music, and her movements were legendary. She was a beautiful girl, dancing her final dance with love in her heart. She allowed her long flowing hair down, and it seemed to float mystically in the air. As the music crescendoed, and she spun delicately around, her hair was falling away from her head. Gently, long golden strands of her hair floated to the floor as she danced. I saw the blood leaking from her nostrils, and down cheeks from her ears. The sparse crowd knew the face of death, and it was surely the final dance. The children ran to her with flowers from the meadow, their hair and teeth had fallen out already. The petrol generator stalled, and for several moments, we were in darkness. To my utter horror, I saw the flowers, and the children glowing in the dark. That night I climbed out the window of the lodging house. The soldier who saw me lowered his carbine when our eyes locked in silence. I ran through the alley and I hot-wired the car. I drive non-stop to the northwest. On back roads I learned as a boy, avoided checkpoints imposed by military. I siphoned the petrol from other vehicles in the night. I began missing my vision during my flight, and by the time I escaped USSR, I was blind. I am only musician who lived. The Chernobyl amusement park. The Pripyat amusement park should have been a fun addition to the town. It was slated to open on May 1, 1986, just days after the disaster. Obviously, the park would never open and has simply been left to rust. The amusement park had a Ferris wheel, bumper bars, a paratrooper attraction, and swing boats. Even though high levels of radiation still exist in the mossy areas of the park, it's a popular backdrop for ruin photographers. The park was also used as a setting in the game Call of Duty 4, Modern Warfare. It bears similarity to Six Flags New Orleans, another eerily abandoned amusement park, which has been empty since Hurricane Katrina. The Soviet government sent in soldiers when the meltdown destroyed robot cleaning crews. After evacuating the residents of Pripyat, the city bordering the Chernobyl power plant, the Soviet government sent robots into the exclusion zone to contain the meltdown and put out a raging fire. The excessive radiation in the air prevented the robots from doing their work, so the government rounded up a bunch of soldiers and gave them a choice: serve 2 years in Afghanistan, where the Soviets were engaged in a brutal conflict against Mujahideen, or spend 2 minutes shoveling sand onto the exposed reactor at Chernobyl. Soldiers who chose Chernobyl were known as liquidators. At the time of the meltdown, and into the 21st century, Ukrainians believe vodka prevents the adverse effects of radiation. So liquidators typically took a shot of vodka and shoveled sand onto the exposed reactor for 2 minutes. Most liquidators passed or contracted an illness due to radiation poisoning. Chernobyl's mutant animals. Many reports of deformed and strange beasts near Chernobyl can be found all over the internet, indicating that radiation had severe effects on the animal population. To be sure, some severe mutations were seen right after the accident. The piglet in the photo above suffered from dipigus and is on display at the Ukrainian National Chernobyl Museum. It was born near the site of the explosion. Contemporary animals, however, are typically okay, even though their internal radiation levels are higher than most. They do not suffer significant genetic mutations, though some species have issues. For instance, some birds have developed smaller brains and some rodents have decreased litters or do not live as long. However, overall animal populations seem to be doing better now than they were when humans were farming there before. According to a 2016 report, some species are actually increasing within the exclusion zone. Yet scientists continue to debate what the long-term effects of exposure will be for the animals that live there. Chernobyl was a cover-up. The documentary The Russian Woodpecker explores a conspiracy theory as explained by Ukrainian artist Fodor Alexandrovich. The theory indicates that the meltdown was actually orchestrated in order to cover up the failure of the Russian woodpecker. The Russian woodpecker was an array radar meant to detect missiles before they'd even been launched and was so named for the loud tapping sound, similar to a woodpecker pecking on wood, the device made. But it cost 7 billion rubles, and it didn't work. The woodpecker, formerly called Duga 3, was located very near Chernobyl. Alexandrovich evidence, the Duga 3 probably didn't work because of the aurora borealis messing with signals, which the Soviets may not have accounted for, and it would have been very bad for Soviet leaders to admit they screwed up. Furthermore, Chernobyl's instability was already well known, as they'd had issues with the reactors before, so a meltdown would make a convincing story. How likely is this to be true? Well, it's a complicated plan that would have had to be perfectly executed to succeed, and to experts, that seems pretty unlikely. But some weird stuff did supposedly happen while the crew was making the documentary, including visits from the secret police and the sniper shooting of one of the crew members during the Euromaidan protests. However, this isn't the only Chernobyl conspiracy theory that abounds. Fatalistic youth is an unexpected side effect of the meltdown. In a report entitled Chernobyl's Legacy, Health, Environmental and Socio-Economic Impacts, Dr. Fred Mettler of the International Atomic Energy Association discusses a unique strain of paralyzing fatalism present in youth who grew up in the shadow of the nuclear meltdown. As Dr. Mettler explains, the population remains largely unsure of what the effects of radiation actually are and retain a sense of foreboding. A number of adolescents and young adults who have been exposed to modest or small amounts of radiation feel that they are somehow fatally flawed and there is no downside to using illicit drugs or having unprotected sex. It's estimated that the negative effects on mental health within the area outweigh the projected physiological effects of the meltdown. Aliens saved us from an even worse fate. There's an alien conspiracy that revolves around Chernobyl. Not that aliens caused the disasters, but that extraterrestrials saved the human race from utter annihilation. According to the conspiracy, people spotted UFOs around the same time as the Chernobyl explosion. One witness reported seeing an object for about 6 hours. Those who believe that this object was both real and piloted by aliens suggest that the aliens helped tone down radiation levels, preventing an even larger blast. Though the damage was certainly terrible, it wasn't as apocalyptically bad as believers say it could have been. A doctor claimed to have seen a similar UFO 3 years later at a time when a reactor was sending off high radiation levels. Similar conspiracies surround the Fukushima disaster.